Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Stealth Hitch receiver tube for a 2020 Tesla Model 3. Now here's what our receiver actually looks like installed, and it's pretty good. It sticks out a decent amount, and that way we can make a lot of clearance for our rear fascia when loading up bike racks or cargo carriers. Now I will point out, if you do plan on towing a trailer, you are going to need to pick up the actual tow kit, as it does change this to a ball mount. You can't simply just put a ball mount on here, it's not designed for that. But for all of your other accessories, this is going to be a great option, and the reason being is it lives up to the name Stealth. So with the simple turn of the handle, our receiver tube opens up, drops out, and you can see it is completely hidden that we have a hitch there. So our receiver tube opening is going to be a 2" by 2" with a reinforced collar. So this is going to accept a lot of different accessories, and really it's a pretty standard size, so your bike racks and cargo carriers should fit no problem. Now this has a 5/8 hole for your hitch pin and clip, and it does not come with the hitch pin and clip, but we have plenty of options here available at eTrailer, including locking ones. So with the Stealth Hitch, not only can you lock this, but if you add a locking pin and clip, all of your accessories are going to stay on here, and no one's going to be able to walk away with them. Now it also has a nice black powder coat finish, so this is going to look good for a long time if you leave it attached on your vehicle. But the glory of the Stealth Hitch is when you're not using it, you can actually just take this, put it in the back of your car, and then whenever you need to actually hook up to it, you'll just make sure that it's unlocked by turning the keys on the tumbler, and then this is just going to slide up into place. And then once it clunks in, you're ready to go. And you can actually turn those keys, lock it, and this will not actually come out. No one's going to take it, so you have that peace of mind knowing that you have the stealth look, but also the security of knowing that this is going to stay with it. Now during the install, I'll actually show you a little bit, but there's going to be a rubber cap that's going to go over where the keyhole is, and that's really nice. It's going to keep that nice and clean for whenever you need to actually lock or unlock it into place. And also there's a nice turn handle here that once unlocked, you can actually just drop this out of place. Once it's out of place, you actually have a rubber cap here that's going to go into where this receiver goes, and that way that's going to stay clean as well. So it's really nice, the fact that you can use this whenever you want. It's going to stay protected and nice and clean. You're not going to have to deal with any dirtiness. And also with this one in particular, it's got a factory cover that's going to go right there, so it's going to stay clean and protected the entire time. So doing some quick measurements, you can see that the hitch pin, the center of the hitch pin hole is aligned with about where the rear fascia extends out to. So that's important to note when putting your accessories in. If they do tilt or fold, you'll want to measure those just to make sure that they don't have any contact with your fascia, scratching it in the process. Now, something you probably already know is this car is relatively low to the ground, so your ground clearance is pretty low, I'll admit that, but let's actually check and see how much. So from the top of the receiver tube opening to the ground, you're looking at it right about 10 inches. And that's important to note when you put your accessories that are suspended, like your bike racks or your cargo carriers. It's going to stick out a little bit, adding length to the car. But also when you go on an incline, sometimes those can tilt down. So just keeping that in mind when you're driving. Now, something else I'm going to point out is the weight capacity on here. So it is rated for 3,500 pounds for gross trailer weight rating, but keep in mind that is with using the ball attachment. You can't use this with a ball mount, but 3,500 pounds is a decent amount of weight if you have that ball mount attachment. Now, as far as the tongue weight rating, 350 pounds is pretty good, and that's going to be the weight pushing down on this. So your suspended accessories, whether it be your bike rack, cargo carrier, loaded up, as long as you don't overseed that 350 pounds, you should be good. Now, if you're wondering how hard the installation is, it's not terribly difficult. You can probably do this in your garage or on your driveway. It might help to actually raise up the car just a little bit, just to kind of get to some of the bolts that are underneath the actual dust guard underneath. But overall, it's not horrible. You will have to plan out taking your taillights out as well as your rear fascia off, as the hitch actually lives underneath your bumper support. So don't let that scare you off, because I'm here to walk you through every single step, and we're actually going to go take a look at that installation right now so we can get your hitch installed. To begin our installation, we're going to be opening up our trunk here, and that's going to gain us access to a lot of different pieces here, and the fact that we are going to have to remove a lot of our taillights as well as some plastic panels here, and that's going to allow us to get this rear fascia off where the hitch is actually going to live. So the first step, we're going to be looking for a plastic push rivet. Now our first step, we're going to go on our driver's side here, and underneath we have this plastic panel that runs along the trunk opening. There's going to be a push pin that's going to be right here. It's going to be kind of hard to see unless you kind of get a good angle at it. So what we're going to do is just use a little pick here, and there's going to be a slotted side of it here. So what I'm going to do is just pry on that button just like that, and we should be able to pull this out. Now there's going to be one more on the other side. And during the whole process of the hitch installation, you're going to want to make sure you hold on to your hardware. That way you have it for reinstallation. Now if it's fighting you here, you can't get the whole thing out, I'm going to use a trim panel tool here. Now you can pick these up here at eTrailer. They're really handy for things like this. These plastic push pins can be tricky at times. So just kind of working it here, see if we can get under the larger portion of it and just kind of pry this out. There we are. So go ahead and get the one on the other side as well. Next, we're going to need to take out our trunk stops here, and these should rotate just counterclockwise to get them out. And they may fight you for the first few seconds or so, but they should come loose. So go ahead and do this on both sides of the vehicle. So now we're going to need to gain access to the plugs on our taillights, and we're going to be peeling back some of this inner liner here. In order to do that, we're going to go ahead and remove this plastic piece where we took our plastic push pins off. So that's just going to kind of gain us that access to be able to peel that back. So kind of just working along here, pretty easy to do. You just kind of find these clips. And it's not fighting me too much, so it should come out pretty easy here. And just like that. So we can actually kind of just set this back here as we'll need it for reinstallation later. But now we should be able to kind of peel this back. Now I do recommend you don't want to get too crazy with it, because if it causes a crease, it may actually kind of be a little bit permanent. And granted, it is just carpet, but again, just take your time here. And we're gaining access to our taillight here. So we're going to need to unplug this. So you can see there is the plug there. There is going to be that little red lock. So sometimes it helps to have a small flathead screwdriver to kind of unpry that, and that way we can get this off. But let's go ahead and unplug it, and we'll be doing this on the other side of the vehicle as well. For a little help here, you can see there's a nice little slot. I have a very small flathead here. It makes it pretty easy to just kind of go in there and pry that out. And that's going to unlock it for us, and we should be able to just pull this out here. Let's see. Once you have your plug undone, you're going to go ahead with an 8mm ratchet here, and we're going to go ahead and just take these off. Now, do be careful. They are pretty small, and we don't want to drop these down and have to hunt for them later. So just take your time here, make sure that you can loosen them up, and I would suggest using the rest just kind of by hand, and that way you have hold of them. Next, we'll be removing our taillight here, and now it can be a little bit tricky at times because you're going to have a little portion where it pops in, and so there might be a little bit of tension here. So I'm able to get this side pretty loose just by pushing on the studs behind, and kind of wobbling it back and forth is going to help loosen that up. And I'm going to try my best to not have to use a pry tool, but it is possible that we will be using a plastic pry tool here to kind of pop this out. So just kind of work this back and forth. Be gentle here, you don't want to crack your taillights. There we go. So pulling straight out, that's going to be the ticket there. I had pressure on those studs, and kind of using my fingers here gently, you can see this is what's holding it in. So you have these little slots here where these pins go in. That's kind of what's holding that pressure. So kind of taking your time again. As you wiggle, don't put too much force. You don't want these to crack, but you should be able to get these out. So go ahead and set this aside in a nice safe place. Next, you're going to want to grab a 10mm socket, and we'll go ahead and get this bolt off. Now you're going to want to head over to your wheel well, and you're going to see that there's going to be 3 plastic push pins. So there should also be one right here, and then also one right here. Now we're going to get those removed, and then also there's going to be a T25 Torx bit, and that's going to be where the actual rear fascia meets the rear quarter panel, and it's going to be kind of tucked up, so you may have to peel this fender or the wheel well back a little bit, and you're going to see it's going to be vertical, so we're going to need to get that out as well. So now that we have our driver's side done, go ahead and you're gonna have those same 3 plastic push pins as well as that T25 on your passenger side. So now with both of our wheel wells done, next we're gonna need to go underneath on our gravel guard here. And the first thing, we're gonna be prying open these little plastic covers. There's a nice little slot here. You can put your flathead screwdriver and just kind of pry this open. And that's going to gain access to this 10mm bolt. There's also going to be a few more underneath here, so let's get these open. So we have the 2 here, and then moving forward, we're going to have 2 here. There's 2 here, and on some models there's going to be a 3rd one here. So as we pry this down, we may check for that. So let's go ahead with our 10mm and get all these removed. So now you're going to want to grab an extra set of hands for this process because the rear fascia is going to come off, but that gravel guard does go with it. So it's quite a bit to work with, but the best way we can do this here is working from the outside in, and then having that extra set of hands, we'll be able to actually kind of pull this whole thing off. So just kind of prying this slowly, you should be able to get kind of these clips to pop one after another, and then up top here as well. You may want to grab a little flathead here, and if you need to, you can push these tabs down, but kind of as you're working the fascia, you should be able to kind of work those clips up and over. As you can see here, this one's pretty easy to do once that fascia is kind of loosened up. So just be careful with these tabs, as if you put too much pressure, they can snap, which is going to cause it to not latch up as well. But pushing down on those black tabs will allow this to actually slide off. And then once you get both sides kind of popped loose, this whole thing should come out. Now, I do recommend having a place set up to put your bumper. That way it doesn't get scratched. Now we're going to be kind of working this to get it loose. And that gravel guard is going to come with it. So it can get a little bit tricky here. And there's also going to be a plug here. So you're going to want to make sure you don't pull too far away, because we'll have to separate this before actually taking the fascia off. So pretty easy here. On that tab, you're going to want to pull that gray back. So with that plastic pulled, we should be able to just push on that tab, separate this, and now we can set our rear fascia aside. So with the fascia and gravel guard off, you're going to see it's going to expose this center plastic here. It's got a few plugs attached to it. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our 10mm, and there should be just 5 of these bolts here. We'll go ahead and get those off. And this is going to kind of dangle for a little bit, but we'll be able to kind of mitigate it and move it around as we're going to get our bumper support off after that. But first things first, let's get this taken off. So as we can see, we do have our wires here kind of holding on to it, and that's going to be okay. We will be kind of moving this around as necessary, and if you want to gain a little bit more access, you can actually take that trim panel removal tool, or just kind of pushing this out. You can pry this off, and that's going to allow this to kind of slide around as necessary. So that's up to you. I think I can get around just kind of keeping mine like this, so it's up to you on that portion. So now we're going to take our 15mm socket, and we're going to be taking off the bolts that are, you can see the holes here. It's kind of nice they set those up for us to be able to remove those. Now there are going to be the reinforcement beams where these actually bolt into the plates. Don't worry about those quite yet. First, we're going to get this impact bar off. So go ahead and get these loosened up. There's also going to be the same on the other side. Now make sure you do hold on to your hardware. If you need to, you can kind of just push them out the side of the impact bar here. Now, you are going to want to actually support the bumper beam, and what I'm doing here is actually I'm going to leave the top one on there, just kind of hand tighten. That way it's going to hold it on in place and the whole thing's not falling down when I'm taking my hardware off. So if you need to, you can absolutely do that. So now with the nuts taken off, you can go ahead and slide this off the actual studs here. And that little section here is going to be hanging down. So just set this aside, and next we're going to be taking our 15 to these actual plates. So now we're going to need to take off our reinforcement plates, and again, it's going to be 15, so use your deep well here. Some of the models will actually have 6 total. This one has 8, kind of depends on the model year. So go ahead and you can take these off. We're going to hold on to this hardware, but these plates will not actually be used because our hitch is going to actually live in this spot. So you can set those aside, you can keep them, you can discard them, it's kind of up to you, but they will not be going on for reinstallation. Go ahead and do that on the other side as well. So now we're getting ready to put our hitch in place. Now some of these will actually have some of this factory sealant here, and you may have to scrape that away. This one does not. It kind of, again, depends on your model year. So if you do need to scrape some of that away, just using a putty knife or a scraper to kind of just get some of that off. That way this hitch will actually sit flush here. So since ours doesn't have it, we're going to move along, and we're going to be taking our plastic little washers here. We'll go ahead and put one on each of the studs. And now we're going to get ready to put our hitch up in place. So we're going to be using the actual nuts that we took off previous to attach just 2 on each side. The other 2 are going to be needed for the actual bracket to put the impact bar on. So go ahead, let's get our bumper beam, or I'm sorry, our hitch, and let's get this in place. So now we can get our hitch in place here, just sliding those over those studs. And once we have this in place, it is kind of holding itself up, which is great, but I'm going to go ahead, and these are going to go on our outside studs here. So just, we'll tighten these down just by hand to have them in place, and then we're going to come back with our torque wrench and torque these down. So now we're going to be torquing these down with our torque wrench. Now I'm going to be using the torque specs in the instructions. So you're going to want to use a torque wrench on this because it's going to make sure that you don't put too much stress on the threads, but also it's not going to become loose over time. So if you need to pick up a torque wrench, we actually have them here at eTrailer, or you can actually go to an auto parts store and rent them a lot of times. But again, this is an important step, so make sure that you are properly torquing these down. And then I'm going to just go ahead and repeat that for the other 3. So now with our brackets that were included with our hitch, we're going to be bolting this up to the reinforcement bar here. Now it is specific on the way that it goes, so it's important that you kind of follow these steps. Now you'll see these are going to go on those studs that were where our hitch was, and these actually kind of curve along with the bumper, and you're going to want this notch that's going to be on the top, and on the impact bar the narrow part is going to go down. So laying it out, it should just kind of sit there kind of like that. Now as far as the hardware goes, we're going to take the bolt that was included in our kit in a flat washer, and we're going to put that through the hole there, and then we'll put our plastic washer there, and then we'll be hand tightening it on with the serrated flared nuts here. Now that's going to allow us to have this bolted onto here, but also loose enough to adjust this to where it'll line up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of my hardware kind of pushed through here and get this ready for installation onto the impact bar. So It may get kind of tricky to feed these on, so if you need to, you can grab a socket to kind of feed it on, but as long as you're kind of hand tightened on there to hold that bracket on, you should be okay. And we're going to do this for the rest of the remaining studs, and then we're going to repeat the same process on the other side, and that way we have our brackets mounted up to our impact bar. And you can also feed these into the side too. In fact, this top one's probably going to be a little bit easier to do it that way. You can see it gains you a little bit more access. Now just be careful, these edges of the impact bar can be a little bit sharp, and you can actually move this bracket kind of over, and that's going to get that stud a little bit closer for you as well. But again, no need to tighten these down too tight, just hand tightening on, just kind of hold that bracket on, should be good enough. And since that stud is actually, that bolt is loose, you can actually just kind of hold this in place too if you need to, and then tighten it from the bottom. But again, just as long as you get all three of them started, that's going to put us in a pretty good position. So now we can go ahead and knock out the other bracket as well. So now we have our brackets on our bumper beam, and we're going to put this up on the actual hitch on the studs here. Now it's important too, this is a good time, if this is not centered up exactly how you want it, you do have a little bit of wiggle room as these are slightly slotted. So if you're not happy with that, I would adjust it and then make sure you go back and retorque it, because once it's on here, it's going to be really hard to go back and center that up. But we're all centered up here, so now I'm going to take our brackets and our bumper beam here, and we're going to slide those over the studs. And again, this should be hand tightened still, so loose enough to where you can adjust them on. And what I'm going to do is, with some of the nuts that we actually removed earlier, we're going to thread these on here. So there should be a total of 4. So let's get those hand tightened on there. So now I'm going to go back with my 15, and I'm going to just tighten the nuts that are on those brackets. This is also a good time to check to make sure it's kind of centered up. Now it's going to be able to slot. The brackets themselves shouldn't move too terribly much, but again, just making sure everything's nice and aligned as we're going through is going to help. So I've kind of just used my finger as a reference to check the edge on both sides just to make sure that they're even. So I'll give it a little bump here and then just kind of double check. And you can take a tape measure if you want to get real specific here, but this should be just about even there. So with that, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to tighten down our 15s here. And we'll be going back with the torque wrench afterwards. So again, just to make sure that it's snug and at least our brackets are in place. So now what we're going to do is take a 17mm wrench here, and we're going to put that on the bolt here. I'm going to just start at the top one, and then with our 15, we're going to go in and we're just going to snug this down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one on each side, and that way this is kind of going to hold it in place, and then I can go back and do the others. Now it is going to be kind of tight here with your 17, so having a longer one to kind of reach in there, and you may have to actually on this bottom one kind of go from the bottom, but similar process, just go ahead, we'll tighten all those down. So now we're going to go back with our torque wrench and our 15mm, and we're going to do that to all. You're going to have the 5 on each side, so these 2 as well as these 3. Now these do kind of bite down pretty good on the nut, so you will probably still need to use this, especially when you're getting those torque really down. That way it's not spinning on you. But these ones, just go ahead, make sure these are nice and torqued. And then these ones, we're going to do it just the same as we did to tighten it. So we put our wrench there. And then I'm going to go ahead and repeat for the rest of the hardware. So now you're going to want to grab your receiver block here, and the bolt should be in it already. So I just took the lock nuts off, and we're just going to slide this in place. And then once in place, we'll just slide our bolts through. And then we're just going to take our nuts here, put these on. And these are going to be 15/16 the bolt head as well as the nut. So we'll go ahead and get these tightened and torqued down. So you are going to need a 15/16 wrench to hold on to that head as we tighten this down. Now there is going to be a torque setting on these as well, so once we get this tightened down, we're going to go back with our torque wrench and make sure we get it all torqued properly. Now with the torque wrench, normally I like to go on the nut side. I think that's a better way to torque it down, but if you don't have a deep well, this will work all the same. But so just make sure that you have this properly torqued down, and do that for both of them. Go. Now we have our receiver actually mounted up. So what I'm going to do here before we get our fascia back on is we can pull this plug down, and that's where our keys are going to live. So we'll need this to put our hitch in later. So at this point, we're ready to kind of button everything up. So making sure that we put our plastic electrical panel here and make sure everything's plugged back in. Now I am going to give one more tip here that's going to help putting the fascia back on. So just to make the installation or the reinstallation of the fascia going back on a little less stressful, what I like to do is actually take a little bit of painter's tape and just run it along the edge where that fascia is going to be, because as you try to put it up, inevitably it's going to kind of want to walk around, and it is plastic, but that plastic can kind of scuff your paint. So this is just a nice protective measure just for you to kind of make sure that you can put it on without having to worry about scratching your car. So just running this alongside that edge is just going to be enough to kind of give it an extra layer of protection. So I'm going to just run it along here and all the way to our wheel well before getting our rear fascia put back up. So now we pretty much have everything installed. We're good to go except for getting everything back in place. And we're just going to use the same method that we took everything off. So doing everything in the reverse order. Just make sure that you have all of your plugs put back on. So that's going to be the one that goes onto the actual fascia. And you also have this here. So make sure that everything gets back in place. You can button up your interior, and then I'll meet you back here. So now underneath your Tesla, you're going to want to check to see if there's going to be an access panel. Some of them do, some of them don't. Again, it kind of depends on the year change. Ours does, so pretty easy here. Just with a flat head, I'm going to twist this a quarter turn, and this should allow us to open this up. And that's going to be great because it's going to allow us access to our hitch. Now, if your vehicle does not have one, you are going to have to trim, and there is a template that comes in the instruction manual. So you'll use that and just kind of cut that with whatever cutting tool that you may have, a Dremel, or even some snips. If you kind of work at it, you should be able to get it. But if you have the panel, you're in luck, and this is also going to keep it just a little bit extra stealthy here and able to close this up when you're not using it. So now to get our hitch in place, it's going to be pretty easy here. We're going to take off this dust cap here, which is where our lock tumbler is. So go ahead, and if you didn't take those keys out earlier, you can take that cap off, grab your keys, and then we're just going to open this up. You're going to see that slides open, and then this you should be able to just kind of push in place. You may twist the handle here, hold that back. You're going to hear that kind of lock in place. And there we have it. That's going to be in place, ready to go. So that way you can hook up your accessories, and then whenever you're done, you can just simply twist that handle. This will drop out, and you're able to close this all back up. And that was a look and installation of the Stealth Hitch Trailer Hitch Receiver for a 2020 Tesla Model 3.